Oh, hodl, 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 save, 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 build a, sound money, sound money. Hey, it's ugly old goat here, and it is 101 and January 8th, 2025. And I'm just doing a little live show here. Uh, oh, we got feedback. Can we eliminate that for me? Okay. All right. Thank you. So, yeah, it's basically my outlook for 2025, and it's time to seize the day. And did arrange to have a special guest today, a Bitcoin mechanic. And the reason I did is when I was doing my outlook, he just happened to come out with a great video on the 1st of January and kind of opened his heart up to the whole world. And we came to the same conclusions at different routes. Incidentally, I got this wonderful uh, portrait of Donald Trump at the border this last week. Whoops. Whoops. Okay. And you can see actually has, I was hoping to find a bloody ear, but instead that they've made one with a little patch on his ear. But I thought that that was I haven't seen one of these anywhere except at the Mexican border. And so Bitcoin mechanic, I see you're here. What do you think of Donald Trump making Canada a 51st state?
I don't think it's a serious proposition, so I don't think it's really worth that much discussion. If it was actually like something that could actually happen, then it would. There's definitely a lot to discuss about
Well,
it, but it's
I
not
hope
gonna
you're right, but unfortunately, he comes across. Sometimes he follows through with his ideas, and of course, he also has this idea of annexing Greenland and calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, not realizing that, it was the Gulf of Mexico because Mexico was the only known part of the known world for over 100 years. The Spaniards were colonizing Mexico and everything in between, uh, beginning with Christopher Columbus. And they, uh, that it, I think that's not part of making America great again, in my estimation. That's kind of just throwing your weight around, and uh, I hope people don't take some of these things seriously. I do kind of think that he has a good point on the Panama Canal. It was a terrible thing that we gave that away. So anyway, how are you doing?
Yeah, not so bad. Happy New Year to you.
Well, thank you. So yeah, I just that's what I want to get on and talk to you about because it seems like my uh, uh, whole thing that I was trying to emphasize is, when I first came into Bitcoin, I thought it could be money, and then the more and more I've studied, the economics, it really will not ever be money in my estimation. Just like gold, a lot of people think that gold was money, and it really wasn't. Gold has never been money except in a few isolated places and cases. And the most outstanding example was the California gold rush, where gold was plentiful and everything else was dear. In fact, they actually in the bars they would have scales to weigh the gold dust, and then there were private mints that actually evolved, and then once those that minted actual gold coins, and then banknotes were also issued, and it was the the rest of the world that was on a gold standard. It was the banknotes that uh, evolved as money and not gold itself. And so that's why I'm pretty well persuaded that, I think Bitcoin is a, great. I'm a big Bitcoin standard bearer. I'm certainly not bearish on Bitcoin. I certainly think it has its place, but I don't think it's going to be as money in itself. I think it's possible that we can come up with a standard where if we use it as a measure of value, then I think it can be money. But I want to kind of I recommended everybody watch your first of the year message. I hope that they have, And I just wanted to kind of get your take on it and why you came to the conclusions that you did.
Well, I think first off, I'm not in any shape or form any kind of a theoretical economist with any sort of knowledge you'd expect to have. And I'm not a well-read Austrian economist or anything of that nature. So um, there's benefits and disadvantages to that. So Bitcoin's not going to fit in anything that's been defined before because first off, the name itself is way too broad to describe the multiple things that Bitcoin does. You never before do you have something that is simultaneously currency and the payment network that the currency moves around on. That doesn't exist in any other context that I know of. So if you're using some courier service to move gold around in a secure capacity, that is not gold itself. If you're using ACH or Swift or something like that to move dollars around, that's a payment network. It's not a currency. The dollar is not the payment network on which you move dollars around on. And there are all sorts of payment networks in the world, and they're all usually, well, they all require permission of the authorities, and they're heavily regulated. But things like PayPal and the Visa network and Mastercard and all that, none of these things are currencies. They're all payment networks. Bitcoin itself is a payment network, but it's also the money that moves around on that network. So I find the former to be very lacking, but at the same time, it can succeed in its nation. So it's got a lot of work to do. I mean, its store of value component is just undeniable, right? If you buy and hold Bitcoin and you've got some sort of ability to wait around for a while and you don't need to panic sell over the next few months or within a couple of years, you're probably going to do absolutely amazingly. And that's demonstrably true for almost anyone that's ever bought Bitcoin. But payment requires that people all around the world actually accept it, and no one is the main thing that prevents people from doing that is punitive taxation. You have to figure out capital gains implications every time you spend Bitcoin, or you have to do everything under the table. So this is a massive impediment to it being usable as a practical medium of exchange. But on some levels, it can work, and depending on how it gets treated and how the technology develops, Bitcoin can be great as having that function of money that I understand money typically has, where I can just go anywhere and it is the most saleable good as you define it, where I can expect anyone to take it because of how good it is without needing to use some derivative like paper Bitcoin that actually exists on some separate network that is handling all of that element of the economy while everyone stashes away their gold 2.0. So I think you can end up having to redefine what money is in the context of a world where Bitcoin exists and it actually manages to get somewhere as a way where you can practically go around the world and spend it.
Well, what I've kind of picked up, and I got this from Aaron Sepulveda. I have a hard time pronouncing his name, but he's an economist from Brownsville, Texas, and he persuaded me that the definition of money really is the most tradable good, and that's not the same as the most valuable good. And it doesn't mean that gold or Bitcoin can't be used as money. It's just that the common and the phenomena, that is manifesting itself, I think now in the crypto world, it is these stable coins that are being used to transfer wealth rather than Bitcoin. Now, we can use Bitcoin, and that's for sure, but it's not it's cheaper and quicker to use, other things, and that is why, and that kind of fits in with my view of, what Bitcoin needs, of course, is the development of banking, which is simply a feature of redeemability. It's not a storehouse. It's not, like the 100% gold standard advocates, think there has to be a one-on-one valuation, whereas banking actually performs a market function by providing that liquidity, but the whole key stands around that redeemability, and I think that redeemability is something that's just kind of lost in this generation. I don't think we know what that meant. I think I do a little bit more because I'm just that much older, but I think 100 or 150 years ago, uh, it meant you lived and died by that redeemability. And we see that now, I think, in contracts. I wrote an article on, these terms of services. We don't have terms of services anymore. They can be changed. It's in the terms of service. We can change these anytime we want without notice. And so that was, kind of my view. And I think, what I got from you is you're disappointed that we're not going to see Bitcoin emerge more as, and I'm going to define it as not as the most tradable good, not a payment system. Bitcoin is a payment system. There's no doubt about that. But, I live here in Ensenada and money is still the peso.
Hmm.
The
So
second most useful money is the dollar, but most of the trade is done in peso.
right, well, that's because the dollar's better than the peso, right? So people are going to use the worst thing. That's I don't remember the name of the law, but that's a well-known, a well often cited law that bad money is used before good money because people want to hold on to the good money.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
and you mentioned that in your article as well, I think.
yeah, it's Gresham's law that bad money drives out good money, and so the money is act and I guess that's what happened under the gold standard. I mean, the people were not using the gold. They used to use gold, but what banks did is they created money and made it redeemable in gold. And of course, you had banks that did not have reserves or it did not create money from real wealth. They just created it, like shit coins are created, and that there was nothing behind it. But uh, the idea behind commercial banking was as long as you're not creating money out of nothing and you're not creating money without reserves. You're just creating money to represent the new wealth coming into the marketplace. And that money can be spent on that new wealth, whatever it might be, or redeemed for gold.
Hmm.
And I think that, that's where the golds, and I think gold bugs have a hard time distinguishing that. I don't think they really understood, what the idea, what banking was and why it emerged organically. There was no organization behind it. It just emerged organically out of the marketplace.
Hmm. Yeah, I think gold. Uh, I don't think gold bugs are really gonna do very well in the current environment at all. I think it's I just there's the number of environments or doomsday scenarios I can imagine where gold is what you want and Bitcoin isn't is so slim because what it would take to wipe out the infrastructure to make Bitcoin useless would basically make gold useless too. Because at that point, the only thing anyone would really want would be food and stuff so basic and primitive. Like I'm talking about wiping out the entire grid and all the electronics on the face of the earth just to really ruin the internet and all that. In that scenario, I don't even think gold is valuable for very long. Like
Well, it'd be
you can't.
more, yeah, but it would have a value beyond Bitcoin, but it does require electricity for Bitcoin.
Yeah,
We don't have electricity, we don't have Bitcoin. Am I
there's
right on that factor?
no, yeah. There's Bitcoin obviously needs us to have like a stable, like modern civilized world for it to work, and I don't pretend otherwise. There are people that will say Bitcoin can work without the internet and stuff, and they're technically right, but not in any practical sense. So, I there is a window in which gold is useful and Bitcoin becomes unusable of disaster scenario. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get struck by a meteorite and hit and have that level of disaster occur. And I think unless you have that, Bitcoin is going to do much better than gold because it just does some of the things gold does, but so much better. Like it is genuinely usable within its own internal confines as a payment network and a medium of exchange. Gold just cannot be. You can never send gold to someone as an instant payment with settlement in 10 minutes for any arbitrary amount that they can verify without a trusted third party or any sort of sophisticated technology or anything. That's just so superior to gold that I genuinely think most gold bugs are just Luddites and they just have an instinctive fear of anything technological, which is you can do that if you want, but your enemy isn't going to. So you're going to eventually lose to someone that's just prepared to, update their worldview.
Well, and I I understand everything you're saying, but in that sense too, I think that gold, it doesn't prevent gold from being used as money. It would actually be more tradable uh, than Bitcoin. And what I guess what I'm trying to point out is there has to be a faster way for it to be used to be more tradable. I'm not talking about it just being
Well,
a payment system because a payment system can be slow or fast. I mean, you have trade-offs for Bitcoin. We love Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoin advocate. I'm a
yeah.
Bitcoin standard bearer. But what I came across with what you were telling us is the problem of using it as money, and what I define as money is the most tradable commodity. And uh, the only way that I can see that happening is not from Bitcoin because we don't want to make Bitcoin faster. We don't want to trade off that security for a more rapid system of transferring Bitcoin. But we do need to have an instant payment method, and that would be based on a Bitcoin stable coin is basically what it is. And it's not going to be Bitcoin. It's just like the dollar stable coins are not dollars. They are dollar stable coins.
Yeah, but
And
what
that
what stable implies that you maintain a peg to something. What would that be with Bitcoin?
Bitcoin,
Something.
you have a bit
Okay.
just like you have a Bitcoin, you have a dollar tether, you have a Bitcoin tether.
Right. Um,
And but the difference is the Bitcoin tether. Now you're going to take it for smaller payments. There is a risk factor involved, but there's nothing preventing us from doing that. And if we want to make, because that's the idea I got from you, you're just disappointed that we're not going to see it being used. And Bitcoin's not designed to be used as money. I don't think it will never be money, but we can use it as a standard, and we can create a rapid payment system based on that Bitcoin standard. And it's really a Bitcoin tether. And there can be different companies and banks offering this tethered Bitcoin.
yeah, I don't think I'm that. I think it's I think it's a little bit. I don't know. I think it's kind of a little bit too obsessive over a specific element of how we view money today. I think Bitcoin will surprise us in how it ultimately gets used. And I think we're trying to shoehorn it into existing technology. That's all. And I don't think it's going to oblige and make things easy for us in that regard. But I don't think that really speaks to its. I I don't think that speaks to some shortcoming about Bitcoin. I think it's mainly my comment on it is mainly about how we are using it rather than how it can be used.
Well,
Right.
I
So
mean, I
I
guess
don't.
that's what I'm trying to break through is that we don't seem to have any problem having a dollar tether. In fact, when the tethered dollar came out, the first ones, I didn't think it was going to work. I
Mm,
really didn't. And didn't until I saw it working and people were using it. It's used more than Bitcoin for money. And so
yeah.
we have to do the same thing with Bitcoin. It's like they've made a stable coin based on the dollar. And what we do is we have competing monies based on the Bitcoin standard. That's the whole idea of denationalizing money and denationalizing banking and having free market banking. And it's just amazed me that nobody's really come up with a Bitcoin tether.
Well, I mean, they have in effect because if you look at things like when people use custodial lightning, like the way look at how El Salvador actually adopted Bitcoin. no one was using Bitcoin exactly. They weren't sending Bitcoins left and right using standard Bitcoin addresses or even their own Lightning nodes. They were just they're using stuff like Blink and Moon and Phoenix and Wallet of Satoshi and all that. All of that is really, you can look at it as a tether type of system. I mean, it's pretty analogous to people moving around certificates that represent gold in a bank somewhere. It's basically the same. I don't see a philosophical difference there. So that was Bitcoin actually being used as a medium of exchange, as money in a country. And I think that's relevant. And I also think that
But
jurisdiction
it wasn't
doesn't.
easy to, none of those are easy to use. I mean, none of them are easy to use in that there's just
Yeah.
simply and again, Bitcoin is an educational. I mean, I'm more educated than a lot of people, but like on the back end, a lot of things I know you know a lot more about Bitcoin and how it works than I do. But that's why I'm grabbing hold not of the technology. I'm not arguing the technology. I mean, I
No.
believe guys like you and Jimmy Song that I understand it's secure in what its value is, but what it is not yet, and I think Lightning just simply demonstrates it. Lightning and Liquid, and I addressed both of those in the article too.
Hmm.
That Lightning and Liquid, yes, what they've done is, and like you were talking about these uh, BIPs, the soft fork that you're in favor of. But all of these are improvements. Like it's just refining the standard. It's refining Bitcoin. It's like taking 995 gold and refining it to 999 gold. Maybe it makes Bitcoin more pure, but it's not something. Banking has to come into play. We have to use that Bitcoin as a standard and build our communities. And I'm talking about communities. I'm not talking about a castle or what do they call that? A citadel. I'm
Yeah.
not. It can't be a citadel. It really does have to be the community. And these are the two things that I've gotten from Aaron. That to me, this is where the future of Bitcoin is. Not that the hard Bitcoin. That's the standard. But what we really now have to do is create free market. That's it's a part. The Bitcoin is simply the standard that we use, but we use other things to do rapid, do our 100 transactions a day, or to do our daily business with. It's simply not. It's fine to pay certain bills on monthly on what we're doing, but I'm talking about Bitcoin as a usable money that we just don't even think about.
Yeah, I hear that. So I have questions for you. First off, like I said, there seems to be some jurisdictional relevance here, right? So, like, I mean, do you consider like some non-US currency that is perfectly operational within one country that wouldn't be accepted outside of it to be money? So Japanese yen, for example, I cannot spend that anywhere in Canada or America, right? It's a
Right.
respected fiat currency. It's useless anywhere except Japan,
Right.
right?
So I'm not, yeah, exactly. The peso the most is money in Mexico. The yen is money in Japan. So what we're talking about, if you want to have Bitcoin used as money, you really, and again, the regulatory thing is we're not going to transfer back and forth between the various currencies. It simply is you have a tethered value uh, that you can uh, transfer immediately and uh, uh, you know I guess digitally. There's no reason you can't create banknotes too, although I'm sure if you become successful at that, you're going to have the authorities come breathing down your neck almost immediately because they don't want, competition. They want the monopoly on money. They
Yeah.
really don't want to denationalize money.
Yeah, I hear that. But I
But
mean,
I mean, I'm just throwing up these ideas because I just heard your frustration of what's going on in the market right now, and that you're, and to me, uh, and again, I've been kind of studying this since the 1970s, and the whole idea of, yeah, I think that it's almost a superstition within the Bitcoin community. Oh, you can't do that because that's not Bitcoin. But that's what I'm distinguishing is because Bitcoin is so good, we can make it the standard.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would mention actually is all of these upgrades that I was discussing. I'm saying these are people trying to add to the payment network aspect of it and make it, scale. Like scaling Bitcoin as a payment technology has been the hardest thing about. Like it's fine as a store of value. It's been amazing at that forever, and people like Michael Saylor that couldn't care less about using it for buying their coffee every day hesitant to do any kinds of upgrades to the payment network aspect of it because everything inherently puts 21 million at risk. The more complexity we add, the more likely we are to create some issue. Um, but no one is proposing any upgrades that have anything to do with maintaining the finiteness of the supply or anything like that. All the upgrades are to do with making Lightning work better and making it scale better and things like that. And my point in the video was we're barking up the wrong tree because the reason people aren't buying it, using it to buy and sell things all day, every day, is not because we don't have the technology. It's because it's a I really just think it just takes time. I think Bitcoin's too new. No one's going to accept it, or typically no one in Ensenada probably takes it. You might know a few stores that do if they're Bitcoiners, but typically in all of North and Central America, apart from El Salvador, you're only going to find very, very niche places that take it, and even then, most of the customers aren't going to use it. So, but I think it's a one-way street. I think as people slowly get into it, people start accepting it more, and eventually it can become the most tradable good. And
But would
uh,
it be Bitcoin if it's more tradable? In other words, again,
yeah, it will.
what I'm trying to distinguish is between the Bitcoin that we know and love and that is secure and the Bitcoin standard, which is simply a measuring value that we use uh, that we can do banknotes or coupons or whatever it is that is tied to Bitcoin, but it's not Bitcoin. It's
Yeah,
simply, and again, uh, that it that's how the gold what that's what the gold standard was. The gold didn't exchange very much. What was transferred was the banknotes that the banks created. They didn't create it ex nihilo. They created money for new wealth that businesses were making, and they would loan them a certain amount so they could pay their suppliers and pay their help. And then those receivers of those banknotes, they could go and trade it in for the gold, but most likely they're going to trade it for groceries and, the horse feed back then,
hmm.
or, lumber or whatever they needed for their daily needs. The only time that the redeemability comes into question is if they question the value of that banknote. But hey, I can't buy anything with it, and so just give me back my gold.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't know. Again, I really do think it's just a bootstrapping thing, and but I mean, I think there's opportunity there. If this really is, if you end up on a Bitcoin standard and we take for granted that it's just useless for payments, then that's an opportunity for you to make something that people will use instead. That's still Bitcoin under the hood, but that can be used.
Well,
Um,
it's not Bitcoin under the hood. I'm not saying that's what the 100% reservists would always say. It's not Bitcoin under the hood.
okay.
It's other. It's simply the key word here is redeemability,
Mm-hmm.
and the key is and what as a free marketer, you don't even want to set what the reserve should be for the individual issuer because it can be different. And that's always been the problem. Like I remember that was a big debate back in the day with Henry Hazlitt. Henry Hazlitt was against any kind of fixed reserves. And that's why I don't know if you've read
Why?
some, huh?
Why?
Well, because the bank is better able to make that argument than a central authority. I'll send
Mm.
you some articles on it. but basically uh, it, the let's see if I can find it. I think it's called the Bitcoin Standard. It's on my. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, there's a big argument on reserves within economists. I'll go see if I can find this article. Yeah, I mean, like this is a big argument with people that say, "Oh, we need to maintain a 20% gold reserve standard." And there's actually been articles where because they had these high reserve standards, the marketplace couldn't function, and that deepened the depression. Whereas if they loosened up the reserves, there was other wealth out there. I mean, basically, you needed to loosen up the reserve, but it's not a decision that should be centrally made. It's a decision that the market can make itself. And once you put any kind of those restrictions in the marketplace, there's always consequences for that.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I don't like encumbering marketplaces with regulations,
let's see if I can.
but I think it would just be people would have a natural, people should be demanding proof of reserves,
No, I can't find it
like,
now.
and they're not doing that voluntarily. So apparently people aren't interested in it. Like the ETF bros are, and and the people using Coinbase as a third party custodian, all these companies holding the coins are perfectly capable of proving that they have the coins they say they have and they don't, which is ridiculous. But that tells me that the market is only interested in at most the illusion of reserves. They're not actually
Well,
interested in
and that
whether.
that and that's the problem. And you're seeing that now. People are trying to analyze Bitcoin by looking at what the ETFs are doing. And no, these ETFs were created for one reason and one reason alone, and that's for the retirement accounts primarily. And and so people are not they don't have it in their retirement account to hodl. They're in their, trading them basically. Most of them are going to be, it's going to, it increases the volatility. And,
I agree. It's an oxymoron. No one can hodl on your behalf. That's not a
right,
thing. You have
right. Nobody can,
hodl
that's a
implies
good one.
private key.
Nobody can hodl in your behalf. So let me see if I can find this. Sorry, I'll send it to you, but I should have had it handy. Okay, let me see if I can find it. How do I search? That's not it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Well, anyway, that's why I wanted to pick your mind on because, basically, I mean, I came to the thing. I call, I really think, you know, this idea of having a Bitcoin reserve is just a silly idea. This, I really consider, Michael Saylor. I mean, been a great educator for Bitcoin, but bottom line, he really is a Bitcoin. He's really, a crony capitalist. He's
Yeah,
in there, pushing his own agenda, which I get it. I guess that's what you should do. But I'm not going to be popular calling him what I think he is, and that is, a crony capitalist. And I don't think that's, we don't know that MSTR has the Bitcoin. I mean, do they or don't they? What's their mechanism?
I don't know exactly. I'm allergic to Michael Saylor in his current form. I actually think he was great when he first showed up in 2021. He was saying some great things, and it seemed like he really was here for the right reasons. And that's been just a slow descent into the worst kind of debauchery. and this recent party that he did for New Year's Eve, the 100K party, was just that was it. That was everything exemplified that you don't want to see. I'm not sure how much of it was Bitcoin Magazine and all the corruption you see
Well, a lot
there,
of it
but
was, and if you notice, the other thing that kind of red flags me, it was all the 100% gold reservists and 100% are, but it's a Murray Rothbard Austrians who are very much in Michael Saylor's camp, and I think I don't think Michael Saylor has a clue of how of what how free market banking arose in the United States, how the gold standard actually emerged organically, and again, the system that he's on. I mean, what's going to happen to Michael Saylor if Bitcoin has a drop below 40,000? And it can happen. Who is it that they attributed it to? Think the Rothschild wrongly. That give me control of the money and I'll control the world. And we still have. I mean, the U.S. dollar is still, the most widely traded currency, and they have a lot of strings they can pull. But the ultimate string they can pull is basically Michael Saylor has forsaken the 10 pillars of Bitcoin that Tyler Jenks so clearly outlined. And number one is its unconfiscatability. And
mhm.
number two, its medium of its transferability, a payment system. MSTR Bitcoin is not part of the payment system and never will be. It can't be.
Yeah. No, he's totally, like I was saying in that video, if you're not going to treat it the way it deserves and requires that you treat it, ultimately that unwinds all of it. Like you can, I don't care if you want to be silly with your gold, the universe is not going to change what gold is because of
Right.
the way you use it. But Bitcoin, if you use it in the wrong way, 21 million starts to become in jeopardy. Because if all of the utility of it starts to exist within centralized opaque networks, then who knows how many of them there are? Because, like you say, we don't know. He doesn't know how many coins he has. He knows how many coins he thinks he has. But when they do those reports saying MicroStrategy has X amount of coins bought for Y price, you don't know if any of those coins exist or not. You can't, and unless they all go to an address, that has synced up to the chain and has verified all the proof of work. You don't have an authentic copy of the history of where all the coins are,
I
and
found the
which
article. Yeah, I found the article, and I'll reference it here.
okay.
We'll show it up. I called it, okay, hang on. Basically, I was addressing the real bills doctrine because I had a misunderstanding of what it was. And it was actually, I think it was George Selgin that corrected me on it. And then I went to one of my old mentors, which was, uh, uh, yeah, I was back here. You probably can relate to this because I was really a big fan of Michael Saylor when he started out. But I was always in the camp with George Salin and Lawrence White, I'm not 100% reservist because that's really just a warehousing operation, if they're honest. But so I am a student of free market banking, and I was one of my biggest mentors was Richard Timberlake, and he had written an article on gold and the real bills doctrine, and so I outlined all this in this article. We'll send you the link. But basically, Richard Timberlake and what they went through, and uh, it came into existence as a complementary postulate to the gold standard, but it could not by itself establish any effective limits on either money or prices. And and though it was popular with bankers and superficially plausible, the real bills doctrine was flawed from the very start because it failed to distinguish nominal from real output. And that's the whole point of you can't have fixed reserves. It linked one nominal variable, the money stock, with another nominal variable, the dollar volume of commercial paper. And so Humphrey and Timberlake, they proceeded with the premise that the gold standard was abandoned in 1914 which I agree with. Everybody thinks it was abandoned in 71. No, it was abandoned in 1914. Uh, uh, and it the gold standard had been operating inoperable since 1914 when the federal government took over the control of banking, which I agree. It's not 1971, guys. This all happened way back right after they created the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, 1971 was more symbolic than
Exactly.
anything else. I agree with that, but I mean, it took multiple knives, right? It was death by a thousand cuts. It wasn't just like, I think it was,
No,
I
they
think there was
seized the
something
gold
material
and
there too.
revalued it. There was a lot of things that went on, but in between. But their point is, we really got off of the gold standard once it worked so well they nationalized it. And of course, once they nationalized it, they corrupted it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
that checks out.
yeah, so he said once a metallic standard's in place, so you just replace the word metallic to Bitcoin. Okay, the institution becomes self-regulating. Uh, Bitcoin self-regulating. Individuals, banks, and other financial institutions, business firms, foreign exchange dealers, the world gold industries unwittingly cooperate to make the system work. This is what is true in Bitcoin today. Other conditions are also necessary or desirable. The supply of common money that banks and individuals can generate on the gold base must be responsive to the quantity of monetary gold. Market prices must be sensitive to changes in the quantity of money, and gold must be allowed to flow freely in and out of the economy in response to private initiatives. This is why, you know, the reserves cannot be fixed. You can't, well, we have to have at least a 20% reserve. Well, maybe you don't need a 20% reserve. Maybe you just need 1%. Maybe you need 80%, but the market can best adjust to this. And it will differ in different localities. You can't have one standard reserve as well. You have to have a 20% reserve to be a sound bank. If they have other wealth, back in that currency, they have no problem with redeemability. So instead of using gold, use Bitcoin. A true Bitcoin standard is a complete commodity money system and therefore has an appeal not found in some other monetary arrangements. Under an authentic Bitcoin standard, the demand for and supply of to money reacts simultaneously through the market prices for all goods and services and for Bitcoin to determine a given a quantity of money. And so money is the most tradable good, not necessarily Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a standard. If prices of all goods and services and capital tend to fall, say because of an increased demand for common money, the, which is different in every locality, the value of monetary gold or the value of monetary Bitcoin being fixed in dollar terms rises to real terms, stimulating increases in the production and importation of gold and in the supply of gold. Of course, that doesn't apply to Bitcoin. We know we have a fixed supply. This, it is a unique commodity in that sense. And I have never bought into this idea. What is the stock to flow ratio? Just doesn't
Oh
apply
yeah,
to Bitcoin.
that's nonsense.
Yeah. Gold has a great stock supply ratio. Bitcoin doesn't. It's a fixed supply. The stock, the stock to supply ratio just doesn't apply to Bitcoin at all. I think that's a fallacy that so many in Bitcoin are looking at because it's a fixed amount. We know what that amount is. Now they're not all out there yet, but we know the maximum capacity. So that's already figured into the marketplace. Now let's just again change the word gold to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the necessary base for currency and bank deposits. The quantity of common money also increases, arresting the fall in the market prices. Alternative, when additional Bitcoin enters the monetary system from whatever source, it tends to raise money prices. That's the only difference. That's the only difference is we know that we're not going to, if the demand for Bitcoin increases, we're not going to have an increased supply. That's
Mm.
the one unique thing about Bitcoin.
Yep, and it's
So,
a inelastic supply is
yeah.
very yeah. There's nothing else of that nature apart from maybe rare collectibles, because the authenticity of them is sort of independently verifiable. Though I mean,
Well,
it's
I doubt if I'll live to see the day that it happens. Maybe I will, but I think that you will be. And so I just wanted to plant the seed in your mind, the idea of free market banking, and the idea that they're really, if we have free market banking, then we can't have, then the issuers. Now, private issuer can say, well, we have this reserve,
mm,
and then live by it. They can certainly do that, or they can say, well, we don't. They can make their own TOS, but I think once you come up with the terms of service, that's one thing that we just culturally have to change. All of these shit coins, they start out with a TOS and then they change the TOS in the middle of the game. And I kind of consider the TOS as the same as redeemability. I don't know if that's an exact equivalent, but it seems like that it is. So, anyway, I think this article also went through Henry Hazlitt because Henry Hazlitt was, uh, I think, I don't want that article. No, a different one. But there was a big thing about Henry Hazlitt had about fixed reserves, and it wasn't it's not an easy argument to understand. But anyway, I just wanted to hopefully, you stimulated me because you came to the same conclusion I was coming to, but you came from a completely different angle
yeah,
than
I'm just looking at it more from the perspective of I've been here for 14 years or something. I still can't use it anywhere as a payment for anything. I always have to go through some middle,
right. Right,
some
and
yeah.
and it's silly not to. I mean, like I say, I mean, the ideal way of payment is, I use my credit cards and pay them off every month. Now I have some personal problems and
Yeah.
wasn't able to do that here. So, but uh, that, and that's how I'm defining money. I'm not diminishing that Bitcoin can't be used for money. But what I'm trying to define, and the thing is, money, it's different in different localities. Like I say, even the dollar was not. They didn't have any money in California then because they didn't. The banks hadn't evolved yet. They actually had private mints that was taking the gold dust and minting it into gold coins. And then once they had you know, gold bars, refine it into bars and coins, and the banks could hold those reserves and start banking off of it. But they would issue banknotes redeemable in gold. But it was not 100% backed. Depending upon the bank, it could just be backed by, a very small percentage because they only needed to cover the redeemability as long as the other money creation was backed by the new wealth that comes into production. And they call, I mean, in the banking, it's commercial papers. I'll call it self-liquidating commercial paper because it is always redeemed, and it's self-liquidating. In other words, the money supply is not determined by the politicians, but it is actually determined by the marketplace. And the money supply expands and contracts depending upon the market's needs. And that was a system that worked so well that we nationalized it and federalized it by creating the Federal Reserve. And of course, we've destroyed it ever since.
Yeah, so I mean, if you'll indulge me, like the future I imagine is that you have Bitcoin payments that have nothing to do with the payment network itself, and then you have Bitcoins that do have something to do with the network itself. So I'm going to pay you using something that isn't Bitcoin, right? I'm going to send you money in from my Coinbase account to your Coinbase account. It didn't actually do anything on the Bitcoin network. It
Right.
just moved money around in a centralized thing. But it can also be the case that, oh, I actually sent you. I mean, it's protocol, right? So there can be a payment I make where I actually pay you to your Bitcoin address from me, and that's going to be, it will remain possible, and the fact that that remains possible and is some percentage of the economic activity on the network means that there's less incentive to for the wheels to come off the way it does when we're using gold, because you're closer to the actual source of it, right? Like there's something about that means you can't go off as far. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the full implications of fractional reserves. I always assumed that they were just naturally a terrible thing. It sounds like you definitely don't agree with that.
No, I
Um,
definitely, well, I think it's a misnomer, in fact, because it's not fractional reserve. It's just not reserve. The whole thing, you have other wealth besides Bitcoin or besides gold. In other words, it's so you're not fractionally reserved. Now, if you become a fractionally reserve bank, then you're an unsound bank. In other words, you don't have the assets and the liquidity to redeem those into whatever you agreed, whether it's be gold or Bitcoin or silver, whatever standard you're using. But in I think that the very term fractional reserve is a bad name because you can just have you can have a Bitcoin bank redeemable in Bitcoin and have 1 or 2% Bitcoin, but the rest you've got 150 times the wealth more than the Bitcoin in other things, whatever it might be
yeah, so like
that's in the
Tether, they don't
marketplace. And
have. Yeah.
that was it. That's why E.T. Harwood called it the art of commercial banking, because the bankers would have to judge what this collateral that they're lending is worth. And they don't lend 100%. They lend maybe, 30% or 50%. They might lend on something good and that's doesn't fluctuate a lot. They might lend as much as 80%, but it's a subjective marketplace value. And as your reserves are depleted, in other words, if people cannot instantly, they get your banknote and they can't instantly redeem it, well, that's immediately going to cause a red flag on your bank, and you're not going to want to. You're going to make good that reserve, or ideally you'll always be able to make the redeemability work. Now, you know, that's the idea behind it. It's not a. It's I think that fractional reserve is just it's a misnomer. A sound bank has plenty of. It may not be Bitcoin used as collateral, but it might be other things.
So you're saying as long as the value of the institution doing the lending is equal to what's lent out, it's not fractionally reserved. Or if you're going to call it fractionally reserved, you people are going by, that my example would be Tether, right? Tether doesn't have the US dollar cash equivalent to the amount of Tether in creation, but they do have
No.
other assets. And if you
Yes, they
take the
have. I'm
other
sure they
assets
have
into,
other longer term
right.
assets. Basically they're making money off the float because they have dollar assets that will expire, in overnight. I'm sure they have overnight paper. I'm sure they have 30-day paper. They probably have 90-day paper. I wouldn't recommend there be anything out past 90 days, but as long as they have that, I don't think there'll ever be any serious. And if they are doing it in overnight paper, then their liquidity is constantly being renewed every day. So, but they also put restrictions on withdrawals. If you look at Lawrence White, when he did an article on these stable coins, they, in order to redeem your some of these stable coins, I forgot which one it is, but you can only redeem $100,000 at a time. You can't redeem $5. You can't
Interesting.
redeem $100. You got to have $100,000 to redeem. Otherwise, you're stuck.
Wasn't
So, and
aware.
they're which is fair. I mean, I
Yeah.
get,
Yeah, yeah, there's overhead to that, so you don't want to. I understand.
but the marketplace has definitely voted, and the marketplace has definitely said, "Hey, these stable coins are more useful as money than Bitcoin or any other shitcoin." I mean, even the shit coins that they give you a value, like they give you a discount on your trading commissions or
It
give you
was,
whatever
yeah,
it
but
may be.
it was extremely low hanging fruit. Like you have the absolute reigning supreme fiat currency, which is the US dollar, with a whole bunch of restrictions that mean 90% of the planet can't realistically use it. Like the minute, if you just come up with a technological workaround for that, which is what stablecoins are, then you got it. You've got every single Argentinian and Venezuelan and El Salvadoran using it immediately. Because what else, like, of course they're going to use it because their local currency's garbage and they're not allowed US dollar bank accounts or any access to any of those payment networks. So, of course, they're going to use stable coins. and it was, it was inevitable. It's still fiat, it's still centralized, but none,
Right. And
like
so
I yeah.
what I'm trying to get the message through, I think the lesson on these stable coins is we need to develop competing Bitcoin stable coins. And basically,
Well, that is any centralized third party that is moving coins around in an internal ledger. So I would include LSPs in that category, and that means everyone that was using it in El Salvador was effectively using that. I don't think you need another currency that pegs. I don't think you need something like Liquid either. I think you can literally just say, if you have an
yeah.
account with my service and you have a Bitcoin balance in there, you can move it around to other users within that same system without using the network itself. I think that qualifies for the same
Yep.
function. So, and I think, but those already exist. So as long as those exist and they're not too opaque or too abusive to their users, that basically ends up being what Bitcoin
But what
is
they're, but it's
as a
not,
payment.
but it is a different than thinking because what it is, it's still a dollar stable coin. That is basically what they did in El Salvador.
Well, they have stable sats, right? Which are, I don't know exactly how they work, but there's some sort of simultaneous thing where a short is opened at the same time as the payment is made so as to hedge in somehow they hedge in both directions. So if I send you $5 worth of stable sats, it remains $5, even if the value of the sats changes. And they have some mechanism there whereby they don't get eaten alive by the market and some, some gap between buy and sell as well, which is how they can maintain their existence and pay for things. So I don't know. I don't. That's what everyone used when I was in El Salvador. I would send them Bitcoin, but they were getting stable sats. They weren't getting sats. So,
Really? Okay. I have not been to El Salvador, so I didn't know exactly. I
man, you
know,
can you. There's a direct flight from Mexico City, man. You got to go. You've got to go to El Zonte. You've got to.
well, I wanted to. I got these other problems that popped up, and so
Well,
I've
I
got
gotta
to.
go, but let me invite you because I'm a Plan B in a San Salvador at the end of this month, and there's
Oh yeah.
adopting BTC right before that. So whether you want to hang out with the Lugano Plan B guys or you want to hang out with Max and Stacy, there's two different events. But yeah, definitely I'll be down there, and I
Oh, what
definitely
this
would
coming
like to
up
see
when this
you.
month? When's that coming up?
End of January. So adopting BTC is like on the 25th of January or something, and Plan B is on the 30th and 31st. I'm at the latter.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I gotta jump off. It's right at
Yeah,
the
well,
top
send
of
me
the
that
hour.
link. I didn't know that was going on, or I can look it up and find
No,
it.
I'll
And
send
I'll
it to
see.
your Telegram after
I
we
don't know if
after
I
we
can
put.
make it or not because I have another thing going on at the end of the month. But all right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in. I hope I just wanted to pick your brain because like I say, I saw your message and I said, man, he's saying everything I'm saying too, and but you came up with a completely different way than I do, and I if you want to tell anybody on your list what you do, let them know about your Start Nine program, how you get nodes. You want to tell the
I'm
people
I'm
who?
with Ocean these days. I haven't worked with a Start Nine for a couple of years, but I still love the product. And if anyone
Okay.
wants to run a node, that's a good way to do it. Unless you want to roll your own Start OS, that is. I work for Ocean mining pool, trying to bring sovereignty to mining, which has typically been a very, very non-sovereign enterprise where people are asking a heck of a lot of permission and not doing any verifying. So it's very much fallen out of line with the overall ethos of Bitcoin. And the point is to bring transparency into mining and make miners responsible for what happens to the blockchain again because they haven't been. And that has led to the whole thing becoming horrifically centralized and just an awful Achilles heel for Bitcoin. But the problem has been largely mitigated by what we've done at Ocean. But if you're interested, if you're a miner, that's where to go. So ocean.xyz is the website, and you can
Okay.
look into what it is we're doing.
Well, actually, I think I have a one of my members that was actually looking. He wanted to actually work for a mining company. I don't know what he's doing something else now, but I might.
Uh,
Well,
I got to jump
he
off.
might be.
Really, really good.
All right. Well, thank you for coming, Bitcoin Mechanic. Hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did, and we will hopefully do another show tomorrow. Bye bye.